Welcome back. By this time next year, Cayman will most likely have a pension law. Joining me this morning to tell us about the proposed pension law is Mario Ebanks, Senior Assistant Secretary in the Ministry of Community Development, and who was also the Secretary of the National Pensions Plan Advisory Committee. Also here is Billy Adam, the Chamber of Commerce representative on that advisory committee. Gentlemen, good morning. Welcome back to the show.
Morning. Thank you very much for having me.
Let's start off by finding out what the terms of reference for this advisory committee for, in basic terms.
Yes, Charles, government's policy on pensions calls for government to set up an inspectorate to regulate all existing and new plans for the private sector and the public sector. And in order to examine that policy and come up with a plan, the government in July 1994 set up a committee and gave it terms of reference. The terms of reference basically included looking at all existing plans, seeing what their parameters were, doing a survey of the private sector and public sector to see what their plans entail and what they saw as their aspirations for pensions, looking at other jurisdictions to see what kind of plans they had, what was working, what was not working, and basically examining the issue of pensions, looking at areas such as vesting, which means how long you have to be in a plan before you can get entitled to your benefits, portability, investment guidelines, checks and balances, all the things that make a plan a success or a failure. And we have pulled from local and international plans to hopefully make the law in the Cayman Islands a success. What we are proposing is not a national plan, not a government plan, but basically a law which will govern all plans in the Cayman Islands, be they public or private sector plans, and to allow freedom of choice so that people can choose whatever plan they wish based on competition, based on capitalism and free enterprise. But those companies have to be approved based on very stringent guidelines which the law and the regulations will prescribe.
Billy, how wide a cross-section of the community was involved in this committee?
I would say that government did quite well in selecting people. We have people from the financial industry, hospitality industry, restaurant, construction industry. The financial services section is in there, both from the legal as well as from the offering trust services and that.
Now, I know in discussions that the three of us had with some other people, there was some confusion as to what the difference between a pension law, a pension scheme, and whether what is being proposed is something similar to Social Security. Let's spend a little time explaining exactly what is being proposed here.
I think that's, for years it's been said that what the government is proposing is not to have a government-run pension plan. There are many people that continue to come and harp on it and try to say that that's what's being proposed. That is not the case. If we want to draw an analogy, it could be very easily compared with the third-party statutory insurance that you need for an automobile. Government requires it. When you go to get your car license, you have to prove that you have your third-party insurance, then you get your vehicle license. That insurance is offered by, in the marketplace, competitive rates, and you choose who you want to go to provide that service. It would be the same thing for the pension. The government will give the oversight, because it's very important that government participate and give the oversight, because you're dealing with huge sums of money. If you were to take approximately a 10% contribution rate in this country, you're looking at approximately $30 million a year going into various pension plans. And you've got to be very careful to ensure that when people reach 60, 65, 70, that the money is there to fund their retirement. You don't have a second chance at 70 to accumulate a nest egg. So it has to be very stringent guidelines.
So government's role is strictly to see that the money is handled safely.
Correct.
But government does not have any access to those funds.
Most definitely not. We would oppose that 100%.
Yes, absolutely, Charles. Government will not have access to the funds. Government will basically set up the regulatory and legislative environment, and the approved private sector providers, be they insurance companies, trust companies, or whatever, will be the ones that collect the money. There'll be checks and balances from who's the administrator, who is the investment manager, who will sell the annuities to the annuitants. So there's certainly checks and balances and division of responsibilities. But the funds will be invested in accordance with the investment guidelines and with prudent management in order to maximize the return to the contributors. So the investment will be up to the discretion of those professionals in those fields.
So what is the thrust of this proposed plan that the advisory committee has come up with?
Right. Basically, the outline of the plan could be summarized in that the contribution age is between age 20 to 60. That's the mandatory age. People can contribute before age 20 and after age 60, but that would be totally voluntary. There's also freedom of choice, as I mentioned before. You can choose which company you buy your plan from, for a company or for a self-employed person, as long as those companies are approved by the Superintendent of Pensions, which is a new post that would be established. The contribution rate as proposed is 10%, and that's split 50-50 between the employer and the employee. But I would want to add that there is a salary cap of $60,000. In other words, contributions is not necessarily be paid above an annual salary of $60,000, so only up to $60,000. There's also a provision in the proposed law that people can stagger their contribution rate. In other words, if an employee is less than 45 years old, when the law comes into force, they can choose to say, well, I don't want to contribute the total 5% by the employee or the employer. I want to stagger it in, so the first year I can pay 2%, we pay 2% each, second year 3%, and so on, up to 5 years, at which time one must reach the minimum rate, which at this time is 10% or 5% each. So that particular phase-in requirement allows us to soften the blow on inflation. You can stagger in the impact on the bottom line and the impact on the inflationary spiral. There's also proposed to be immediate vesting. Once you join a particular employment, you have a benefit in your package for pensions. You are in their plan. And if you're only there for 6 months, after you complete probation, you are entitled to your pension. And if you go to another employer, you can carry that with you. What happens now is that some people have to be employed for 10, 15 years with a particular employer before they vest in the pension plan. And that is really not fair, because the person is entitled to a pension. Pension is a right, and they should be able to vest and carry it with them, especially if they're paying in. There's also portability. If you leave a particular employer under this plan, you can get a check paid to the new employer's pension plan, and your pension is portable across to various employers. We don't want to encourage people moving from job to job, but the fact of the matter is, in our labor market, that happens. So we cannot tie people down to one employer, and we can't hold their pension funds with one employer. We have to let it be portable.
Whatever you invested, you should be able to take with you.
That's right. And the benefits that we are trying to proposing is a retirement benefit, which you get at the age of retirement. We're also recognizing a disability benefit. If somebody is permanently disabled, they can start getting their pension payments early. And also there's a survivor benefit. If the contributor passes away, the survivor or the beneficiary would also be entitled to a pension that person would have got had he lived on to retirement.
Now, it will be up to the employer to choose where the money is put, or who administers the money and sees that it's invested safely?
Yes, each employer would have the right to say, well, we choose to have a pension plan with pension plan Y. But it would not disadvantage the employee in any way, because if he was coming out of ABC pension plan, the funds are just transferred into pension plan Y, and it just continues without any loss of benefit. One thing that I would like to emphasize is that basically pension plans fall into two categories. You have a defined benefit and a defined contribution. Defined benefit is a more traditional type of plan that's been around for several hundred years. The defined contribution type of plan is much simpler, and you find it's much fairer to the employee. The defined benefits type of plan, a lot of benefits are lost when people transfer from one employer to the next, and as well, people have used it for tax purposes to try and defer tax during working years, both from a corporate and a personal standpoint. We don't have any of those conditions here. But if someone already has a defined benefit plan, the valuation method will be brought to make it more honest and correct, and so that when the transfers do take place, again, that the worker is protected as to the value of benefit that is transferred.
What happens with existing pension plans?
They continue provided they satisfy the requirements of the law. You have to be audited, you've got to have set investment guidelines, and these things have to be followed. Now, most of the plans here, I can't personally think of one that probably wouldn't, maybe with some minor modifications, especially on the vesting period, probably be, passed by and come in under this law. There are some changes, but I mean they're not horrendous changes, and the changes would be based on common sense and being honest with the members of the plan, the contributors, whose funds it is, and those funds need to be passed on and reserved.
Now, who do you see actually administering the money and investing it to get a good return on it?
Well, there'll be trust companies that are already in existence on the island. There's some insurance companies that can do it, and some of the banks, and you'll probably find new organizations that will be set up. I have participated in the Chamber of Commerce pension plan, which was set up as a separate entity, but then the Chamber of Commerce pension plan, we contract with service providers. Global Life to provide the administration. Cayman National Bank presently has a contract to do the banking, and Bank of Butterfield Investment Division, they invest the funds for us based on guidelines that have been established. And then the members elect the trustees, and they basically, the members run the plan, the ultimate control, because they decide who's going to represent them.
So all the pension law and the government will be doing then is to make sure that those people that are administering the money is doing it in a safe manner.
Exactly, that is the purpose of the law, to manage the whole process. And let me just say this, that in regard to the existing plans, the government or whatever arm is established to supervise pension plans will work very closely in the partnership with existing plans to let them move into a transition of falling within the ambit of the law. There's a suggestion made in the law that you give existing plans up to 10 years to meet all the requirements, because if you have an employer who has been far-sighted and have gone and put the plan in place, you need to work with them to ensure that over a reasonable time frame they can meet all the requirements, such as immediate vesting, portability, being fully funded, in other words, being able to pay all their benefits to the people who are presently in their plan. So we're going to work closely with them, with actuaries and with the department that is set up, so that people have a chance to keep a good plan if they have one, or bring their plan in line if it's not as good as the law prescribes.
This will add to the cost of doing business. Have you met any opposition from the business community to the mandatory contribution of the company?
I don't think that it will add to the cost, Shallow, because what we're doing, what is the alternative? We have seen every year the government social services role to help people that fall under the means test. This amount of money is increasing every year. The payments a few years ago was $75 a month. It went to $150. Now it's going, I think, to $200 a month. And this is only going to continue to go up. So we're paying it one way or another. If we want, we can increase the duty on food to 23%, 24%, whatever it'll take to increase the budget to pay these fees. Under this system, it's very fair, is that I'll prepare for my retirement years by during my working life, I'll put funds in my account, which I will have certain control over, and I will get those benefits, or should I die, my estate will get those benefits, or if I become disabled, I will get the benefit, and my family. So we're paying it one way or another. It's just that this is a much fairer way to do it, because everyone that we have no choice, we all have to eat. So some people will be spending all their money, as it's currently the case, not contributing to their future, and when they need it in old age, they go to government for a handout. And that, of course, destroys your society as well, because people then start to depend on government. And when you start to look to government, you then lose your self-dignity rather than preparing for your own future.
Okay, so you make a good case, but are there people who don't buy it?
Well,
there always will be somebody. I mean, that's a democracy, thank goodness, because you're always going to have some opposition to whatever you propose.
Well, obviously, there is going to be a cost. Now, there's no way of painting that in any other color. But we have put into the law provisions to soften the blow to the bottom line, as I mentioned previously, the staggering in of or the phasing in of the contribution rate, etc. But we're trying to educate the public. This is more of an investment, as Billy was mentioning, rather than a cost. And if you have a society that saves, you have more money for investment, and if people can watch their particular fund growing, and they can see, well, look, I'm putting in money, but my fund is growing. So when I reach retirement age, I can retire and not have to work till age 80 or 85. I think all of that augurs well for mitigating against the argument about cost and looking more at the investment and long-term retirement planning. We're trying to soften the blow, but you got to realize that the voluntary system has not worked. People say leave it to the business community, leave it to the voluntarism, but it hasn't worked, and we're saying let's put in place the conditions and let's make it mandatory. Let's educate the public, let's work as a partnership, and we can hopefully, before too long, have a proper framework in place that will ensure this saving society and this long-term planning for retirement within prudent and proven checks and balances of pensions that we've drawn from around the world and locally.
You want to add something there?
Yes, I was just reading an article just this week out of the British newspapers where the British government has recognized that the voluntary system hasn't worked. And presently in Britain, over 30% of the people still do not have pension plans. And they're moving and trying to catch up with where we are here. And they would like to get where everybody mandatory has to contribute to a pension plan that's approved by the government. So because it's horrendous the amount of money that they have to pay out in the British system to support the people.
Are there provisions for the part-time worker?
Yes, sir. Every worker. There are no exemptions.
Regardless of how many hours you put in?
Private sector, public sector, that's civil servants, will be covered by the law. The part-time, short-term, local, Caymanian, expatriate, it makes no difference because we all get old. So in order for you to get any benefit at retirement, every dollar that you earn, a percentage needs to go towards to fund your retirement, because every dollar that you earned funds a certain lifestyle for you. And if you want to maintain that lifestyle, when you stop working, you have to fund it. It's just very simple. So form follows function. And if the function that we want to have here is for people to live at a decent level in society, to have food on the table, a roof over their head when they're 65, 70, 75, then you have to take that money and put it to one side during your working life. And we have a lot of people here, Caymanians, that work 2 and 3 jobs. And so if you don't get them for their nighttime job, they might work in the morning in the hospitality industry in one property and at night in another. And both of them are considered part-time. That isn't just Cayman either. The world is going towards part-time workers. And so, in the United States right now, 35% of the workforce is part-time or contract or short-term. So you have to include them.
Well, gentlemen, we could carry this conversation on for some time, and we'll have a chance to do it on Issues 27, where we'll dissect the pension proposal in full. Thank you for coming by, and have a good day.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the Minister and the Permanent Secretary, I want to thank you for bringing us on this morning.
Very well.
Thank you, Charlie.
We'll be right back with more Daybreak.